Good morning. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. I'm well this COVID-19 morning. I hope we get a lot done today. So let us begin. Are you ready? Yeah, you look like you're ready. So we're going to start when we left off the last lesson, give or take a few. So we talked about flowers, the fertilization of flowers, and now we're going to talk about what happened to the various flower parts after fertilization takes place. The sepals, which were the outer calyx part that protected the flower while it was a bud, the petals, which protected the stamen and the pistils, they will wither and fall off because they don't have any purpose anymore. The stamens would have already produced their pollen grain, and we've had fertilization, and there's nothing to protect anymore by the petals. Now the sepals, some of them may stay, parts of it may stay at the bottom of the fruit. If you ever looked at, when you do the drawings, you know when you're a little kid and you do a drawing of an orange and the little green part at the top of the orange, it looks like a star, those are the remnants of the sepals. The ovary will become the fruit. The ovary wall becomes the fruit wall. Ovule becomes the seed. And the integument, which is the wall of the ovule, will become the seed coat. Oh, it's gone again. So then the fertilized egg or the fertilized ovule becomes an embryo surrounded by an endosperm, which supplies it with food. And the purpose of having fruits are to protect your seeds and help the seeds to disperse or scatter. So the next time somebody tells you to eat your vegetables and they tell you, and you go and you get yourself a tomato is a fruit. It has seeds. So the things with seeds, your apples, they are your fruits. So finally we get around to lesson 6, seed dispersal and germination. And here you have lovely seeds. Seeds have a seed coat, which is a tough protective covering to protect the embryo from damage and also protect bacteria and fungi from entering the seed. There's a tiny hole called the micropyle that lets water in to the embryo for germination. Without water, you can't have the enzymes activated and all of the processes that are needed for the growth of the embryo to begin. So an embryo contains, in the seed, you have the cotyledon, which contains starch and protein, which nourish the embryo during germination, and cotyledons also contain enzymes. Then you have plumule, which forms the leafy shoot, and the radicle, which forms the root. And here we have the structure of the seed. But before we go there, let's look at a video that I'm sure some of you are going to, some of you will have done this already in your schools where you would have dissected a seed. So we're going to watch a gentleman dissect a seed because my camera is not fancy enough to show you this dissection. Generally, the idea is to have you look at Give me a minute. I'm having the usual, why won't my thing show up? Ah, here we go. Show all windows. Here we go. And oops. Here we go.
And I've got two dicot seeds. I've got a kidney bean seed and a lima bean seed. Those are going to be our dicot seeds. We're going to go ahead and get started with the corn seed first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look over the outside of the corn seed, and I'm going to look for this white sort of apron-like structure. You can see it right here, this white apron-like structure. And this is going to be the embryo, and we want to look for that, because if we cut the seed in the wrong plane, we're not going to see the structures that we need to see. So let's go ahead, we're going to cut this white apron-like structure right here. And I'm going to take my scalpel, and I'm going to cut that. Be very careful when you cut this. You do need to hold the seed, but be very careful how you actually cut this seed. So I'm going to cut right in the center of that white apron or embryo. And you can see I cut that right in half. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of Lugel's iodine on it, just a very light coating to sort of bring out some of the structures. So very light coating. I'll put just a little bit on the other half of this. I'm going to let that soak in for just a second. And go. So let's go over the parts of this monocot seed. And this is going to be a little difficult, but the outer part, you can see that there's an outer tough layer. I'm going to get the dissecting needle underneath it. But there's this outer tough layer. You can see I'm actually teasing back a little piece of it here. There it is right there. That's going to be the seed coat, and that is a protective covering, mainly to protect the seed against digestion when other animals eat it. But let's take a look at some of the other structures here. The really dark material right there, that's going to be endosperm. It stains deeply black because it's got a lot of sugar in it. So that deeply black staining structure is going to be the endosperm.
Actually, the black stain is
the
because
lighter,
of starch,
more,
not sugar.
Gray staining region right here is going to be the cotyledon. That's another food source for the developing embryo. And this very light area right in here, almost like a sliver, this very light area is going to be the embryo. That's going to be our developing embryo right there. And those are the structures we want to see. Seed coat, endosperm, cotyledon, and embryo. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the dicot seed. And I'm going to start with the lima bean first. Now, this has been soaking for about 8 hours or so, so it comes off pretty easy. You can see that just by moving my fingers that the seed coat is literally falling right off. So that's the seed coat. I'm going to put that aside, and then very gently, you can
The seed coat is also known as the
right
tester.
here, you can see a little bit of the embryo sticking out right there, and we don't want to damage that. We want to try to keep that intact. And I'm going to just ever so gently just give it a little pinch, just a very small pinch. This is a dicot, so it's going to split in two normally. And as I open that up, you can see the two halves of the bean seed. And what you're looking at right here, this is all going to be cotyledon, food for the developing embryo, all cotyledon. And then you can see this structure right here. This is going to be our embryo. So what we can do sometimes, if it's not obvious right away, is I can put just a very small amount of iodine on here. And then I'm just going to pat this. And you can see this white area right here. This is the part of the embryo right here. This is going to be the epicotyl or plumule. And then I like to divide this into thirds. So that would be the top third. The middle third right here would be the hypocotyl. And the lower third right here would be the radical, which will develop into our root. And those are the parts of the bean seed that you want to see. Now lastly, I have a kidney bean here, and you can see if I pinch it a little bit, it's not going to come apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the very tip of the scalpel, hold it like a pencil, actually going to put it in the tray, and just with the very tip of the scalpel, I'm just going to cut through that seed coat. I'm not going to go into the seed hardly at all. And that should be enough to peel away the seed coat. And as you can see, I'm starting to peel it away ever so gently. I'm going to peel that away. All the seed coat. I'm taking care not to squeeze it or pinch it too hard. I don't want to damage the embryo. And you can see the embryo sticking out right there just a little bit. Now I'm going to give it just a little pinch so I can pull this apart. There we go. It should just break in two automatically because it is a dicot seed. Let me move some of these other parts out of the way. I'm going to dab this just a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of iodine on here so to bring out the color, just a very small amount. And I'm going to soak it up just a little bit there. And if we look in here, you can see the embryo right here. Here's the embryo, and then you can see the top part of that embryo right there, that epicotyl or plumule. And then the middle third is going to be the hypocotyl, and then the lower third is going to be the radical. And again, all of this other area right here is going to be our cotyledon, all cotyledon, all cotyledon, which is going to be our future food for our developing embryo. And that's going to be it for the bean seed dissection.
This is a drawing of that we just looked at, showing just one cotyledon. You have the plumule, or the part of the embryo that is going to grow into the shoot, the radical, the part of the embryo that will grow into the root. So the plumule and the radical together form the embryo. There is a tiny hole called a micropyle through which water will enter. And you have your cotyledons. Beans, peas, mangoes, they all have two cotyledons. They're called dicotyledons. Then you have your seed coat. Oops. And you have your seed coat. Your monocots have your endosperm, the epicotyl, or that's the part of the plumule, and then down here you have your radical. These things here are caps, special tissue that helps to protect the young shoot and the young root as it erupts from the seed. And here you have the endosperm, which is going to provide food for the growing. So any growth you have, whenever you have growth, you need food, energy for growth. You need food to build tissue. And that is what the endosperm is going to provide. And again, another diagram of the and here you have drawings of different North American seeds. Okay.
Not everybody was there. Sean, you probably need to, I don't know if you do it yet, just create a meeting. I don't know if you need one of us to join it.
At the end of the day, I'm going to put the video, the link for the video, right here into the chat, and you can find it. Also, it will be also be loaded onto the website. So nobody got to see the PowerPoint, or that was just one person who couldn't see the PowerPoint? Is there anybody else who didn't see the PowerPoint? Okay. So, because we're about to have another PowerPoint, so I sincerely hope that all of you are with me.
Hello, boys and girls. Were you ever curious about the different parts of a bean seed? Well, for today's lesson, we're going to be talking about parts of a bean seed. Are you ready? Let's go. A bean seed has 4 main parts: the seed coat, the food storage, the embryo, and the leaves. The seed coat. The seed coat is the outer part of the seed that keeps the seed safe. It's really like our skin that keeps our bodies safe. The food storage. The food storage keeps the food and feeds the baby plant. The embryo. The embryo is really a big word that means the baby plant. And finally, the leaves. The leaves make food for the plant when it gets really big. These will be the plant's first leaves. All right, let's recap. A bean seed has 4 main parts: the seed coat, the food storage, the embryo or baby plant, and the leaves. You did such a good job today. This is my happy dance. Can you do a happy dance with me too? Awesome job. Goodbye. This video was produced by Tremaine Ingram, Senior Assistant at Buttonwood Preschool.
Here we go. Seed and fruit formation and dispersal of fruits and seeds. So here as we said, the seeds are when you have a fertilized ovule. What happens when you have fertilization from the last class? You have pollen landing on the top of the stigma. The pollen tube grows down into the ovary, and then the male gametes travel down the pollen tube, and eventually the male gamete will fuse with the female gamete. The male gamete will fuse with the female gamete, and you get a fertilized egg or fertilized ovule, which becomes a zygote. The wall around the ovule, the integument, will harden to form a tough protective seed coat called the testa. The seed coat contains 1 or 2 seed leaves or cotyledons. The cotyledons are a store of food for future use by the embryo. Monocots like grass and maize. Maize, you need to learn the term maize. It's what we call corn on the cob or sweet corn, but maize is what scientists use, and the scientific name is Zea maize, and it's one of the examples that come up often under BGCSE. Then dicots, such as peas and beans, have 2 cotyledons, and here you see clearly on the drawing, on the picture, 2 cotyledons. Each fertilized ovule then contains a single cell zygote formed from the joining of the male gamete and the female nucleus, for the male and female nucleus. That single cell zygote is going to keep on dividing and dividing and differentiating to form your embryo. What I mean by differentiating is as the cells divide, they become specialized. So some of the cells of the embryo are going to become the parts for the shoot, and some are going to be for the parts of the root. So what happens to these other floral parts? Again, since the petals and stamens are no longer needed, they will wither and fall away. The calyx, that is the sepals, may either remain intact in a dried and shriveled form, or they can fall off. The same thing often happens to the style and the stigma as well. They will wither and fall off. All that remains is your fruit, which is a fertilized ovary with seeds, with the fertilized ovules inside. Oh, I must remember to slow down. Sorry for going so quickly. So the embryo of a flowering plant. This is a different type of bean, and you can clearly see the embryo in this picture. You can see the pointing downwards is your radicle, and the curved part that is still inside the cotyledons looks like it has little tiny feathers, which are the embryonic leaves. So the embryo contains an embryonic shoot system called the plumule and the embryonic root system called the radicle. Fruits and seeds. So the fertilized ovary forms the fruits with a seed inside. I don't know about you, but sea grapes are some of my favorite fruits, and it has a large seed inside. One of the jobs of the fruit is to help protect the seed. Now, if you've ever had the pleasure of having your sea grapes, the part that you eat, the nice purpley thing that stains your teeth, and it's so delicious, that is your fruit. The harder part that you're not going to chew and bite into is the tester that's hardened that you're not going to, that's going to protect the embryo inside. Another job of the fruit is to spread the seeds. And when we're talking about the spreading of fruits and seeds, we call it dispersal. And dispersal scatters the seeds so the plants growing from them are less likely to compete with each other and with their parent plants. What do you think? Just think about it. If every mango tree that ever lived, or the first original mango tree, just dropped all of its seeds right around itself, then there would be no mangoes anywhere else. So those seeds have to be taken someplace else. So, and not only would there be a problem, you'd have so many of these offspring gathered around the parent plant that they won't be able to there won't be enough water with all its other little siblings around. They'll be starved for light because they're right there under the parent being overly shaded. So things need to be scattered. And here that when you looked at the video of the dissection, you can see the external features of the seed. This is the whole bean seed with the swelling where the radicle is, then the tiny hole and called the micropyle. The hilum is where the bean seed was attached to the pod, and you have the tester covering it. In red kidney beans, the tester be red. Pigeon peas, once they dry out, the tester is brownish. Before they dry out, you have the greenish color. So you have micropyle, the small hole near the hilum through which water is absorbed during germination, the hilum, which is the scar, which shows where the seed was attached inside the fruit or the pod in this case, and the tester, which is the seed coat, which protects the seed. The plumule, or the young shoot, is going to develop into the plant shoot system. This is the plumule here, your radicle, the young root, and your cotyledon. Bean has two, store food for developing embryo, and it uses this food until its own leaves are able to make food by photosynthesis. So when we talk about germination, once this plumule has erupted through the soil and starts to form green leaves, they can make its own food, and it no longer relies on the store of food from the cotyledon. You should be able to label, and in order to help you label, I think that if you practice drawing these things as well, you'd find it easier that when it comes around to exam time to identify the parts. So you have your endosperm, which has the food store. It is formed when a male nucleus fuses with the endosperm nucleus in an egg. In some seeds, such as beans, the endosperm is used up before the seed is shed, and you just have a cotyledon. So in the maize grain, you have endosperm and you have a cotyledon. And the food is digested here and then broken down in the endosperm, passed down into cotyledon, and then into your growing plumule and your radicle. Seed dispersal. In many plants, fruit and seeds are adapted so that they're carried far away. Now, adaptation, in biology, we use the term adaptation a lot. An adaptation means having developed specialized structures or habits that will cause the organism to succeed. And there are different adaptations the different plants have with their seeds, but all of these dispersal adaptations are so that they can carry them away. And the advantages include, so there's less competition for light, less competition for water, and less competition for space. They won't be crowded. It's the same reason why your parents are going to want you to leave your home, because they don't want to be crowded. Eventually, when you're older and self-supporting. Now, there are various methods of dispersal. There's good old gravity, wind, animal, mechanical, and water. If you look at these seeds we have here, can you guess which ones of them are perhaps carried by animals, which by water? Think about it. These, of course, are North American plants. Some of them we have, some of we buy, but others are with us. So, who knows this gentleman here? This gentleman here is Mr. Isaac Newton, and apples are falling all over his head. So gravity causes the heavier fruit to fall to the ground. Mangoes, passion fruit, coconuts, they are originally dispersed in that way. Now the fruit can decay where it is. The fruit may decay where it is, and the seed can germinate under the parent. However, the fruit falling from the ground also allows animals to carry it away without having to climb up the tree or be up the tree in the first place, or it can fall into water and be carried away by water. Wind dispersal. Yellow elder seeds have, and these are yellow elder seeds at the bottom, they have these wings that make the seed lighter and so they can be blown about more easily. So some of them have broader type of wings that just slow their descent and allow the wind to catch them and blow them away and get them away from the parent plant. I think dandelions are not, I've not seen dandelions on our lawns here, but I think every cute little picture of a cute little girl blowing a dandelion puff ball and all of these dandelion seeds with these feathery hairs blowing away. And they have this sort of parachute thing that the wind lifts it up and floats it away. Another method of wind dispersal, so we have wings, we have the parachute, and we also have things that they call a pepper pot. I don't know why they call it a pepper pot, but here it is. So you have this little pot-shaped structure with these little holes. And when the wind blows the stalk and the capsule, the seeds fall out of the holes. This here is of a poppy plant, and this is a poppy flower. And when all the fertilization is done, this is the seed that it will produce. The seeds are produced, in this capsule. Then, of course, fruits. That's some interesting things. Fruits. Yeah, I must correct that. So mangoes, berries, usually fruits are brightly colored to attract the insects and the birds themselves. Of course, there is the luscious, delicious smell. Anybody who's ever been in a yard full of mangoes, where you have 4 or 5 mango trees on a summer's day, the scent will just tempt you to go and climb that tree and get yourself some mangoes. So the same thing for birds. So the animal will eat the fleshy fruit. In some cases, the seed will be still protected by its hard covering, and they'll discard it. In other instances, when the fruit is eaten, the seed passes through the animal's gut, but the tough seed coat will not be digested, and the seed is passed out in the animal's feces. And usually that happens far away from the parents. Any of you who's ever had to wash bird splat from your car, you're probably washing away some seeds in there. Then you have the adhesive fruits. Walking through the grass, every person who's walked through the grass or the bush has had seeds stuck onto their socks or their clothes. The first drawing shows a shepherd needle, and this is it at a ball, and these are the second drawing shows individual seeds of the shepherd needle, and the third one shows a different type of seed altogether. So they have hooks, or they are sticky, and so they can catch onto mammal fur or our clothing, and they're carried away some distance before they fall, or they're brushed off, or they're scratched off. Then we have mechanical dispersion. You have leguminous seeds such as peas and beans, and this flower here is the poor man's orchid, and you can see that the pod has burst and scattered the seeds. What happens is the pod wall is dried out in the sun, so the fibers of the fruit wall shrink, and you get this tension. And when the tension is released, the seeds are flung out as the fruit wall splits, and the 2 halves of the fruit wall suddenly curl back, flinging out your seeds. You have water dispersal. Some fruits are buoyant. That means that they can float in water. Inside the coconut is hollow, so that's air-filled, so it allows the coconut to be buoyant. In other words, so it can float. Because it's covered in that hard outer covering, it's waterproof, so nothing can get into it. The propagules of the red mangrove are also dispersed by the water. Now, propagules aren't strictly seeds. They're more seedlings than seeds, because the seed starts to develop on the tree before it's released. But they are dispersed by water. Coconut, yes, coconuts are dispersed by animals when the animals are us, but its adaptation is also by water. It can be far away from its parent plant, just floating along in the ocean or down rivers, so it can get to be very far away. Here we go.
In 2012, this stormwater basin behind me was constructed to keep the surrounding neighborhoods from flooding during large rain events. It has 5 artificially constructed ponds and a canal that connects them all. When the environmental engineer and his team built the basin, they planted 18 different species of plants that are native to the area and thrive in the wetland setting. It's been 6 years since construction, and you can now find over 60 different plant species in this basin. So how did so many different plant species find their way in? Well, over the past hundreds of millions of years, plants have evolved many different and unique methods of dispersing their seeds and moving throughout their environment. First, trees and other plants can drop a large and heavy fruit full of seeds from their branches. Some of these fruits, like apples and coconuts, roll away from the parent plant, decompose, drop their seeds, and begin a new plant. Some of the 12, this stormwater basin behind me was constructed to keep the surrounding neighborhoods from flooding during large rain events. It has 5 artificially constructed ponds and a canal that connects them all. When the environmental engineer and his team built the basin, they planted 18 different species of plants that are native to the area and thrive in the wetland setting. It's been 6 years since construction, and you can now find over 60 different plant species in this basin. So how did so many different plant species find their way in? Well, over the past hundreds of millions of years, plants have evolved many different and unique methods of dispersing their seeds and moving throughout their environment. First, trees and other plants can drop a large and heavy fruit full of seeds from their branches. Some of these fruits, like apples and coconuts, roll away from the parent plant, decompose, drop their seeds, and begin a new plant. Some of the softer fruits can actually open upon impact with the ground and scatter their seeds in the process. These fruits can also be carried away from their parent plant by water or animals, which brings us to our next method. If an animal eats and digests the fruit, the seeds will pass through the animal's digestive tract. Because of the harsh, acidic conditions of the stomach acid, plants have evolved to make seeds with very hard outer coatings or shells. This way, the seeds pass right through the animal's intestines, and the animal drops the seeds out in a nice, fertile poop. Oftentimes, the animal's waste provides a good place for the seed to sprout and begin growing and spreading. Plants that use this strategy have evolved to produce brightly colored fruits that taste very sweet, and the animals love the sweet-tasting fruit. Raspberries, grapes, dates, and other berries use this method to attract birds and small rodents who travel long distances. Other plants use animals in a different way to disperse their seeds. These plants have evolved spiny or hooking seeds that can actually get stuck to an animal's fur, skin, or feathers as they walk through their environment. You've probably had this happen to you if you have ever gone on a long walk or a hike and noticed some plant seeds or debris sticking to your pants or socks. Eventually, these seeds fall off the animal, or your pants, a long distance away from the parent plant. Plants like Trifolium angustifolium, or the narrowleaf crimson clover, use this method. Perhaps the most interesting method of seed dispersal uses the natural process of evaporation to actually burst open a seed pod with an explosion. During hot, sunny days, the side of the seed pod that faces the sun gets warmer and drier than the side in the shade, which builds up pressure that creates a mild explosion or popping and can send seeds flying up to 100 meters away from the parent plant. For example, this tree is actually nicknamed the dynamite tree because of how loudly the fruit explodes when the pressure builds up on the inside. Other plants that use this method include exploding cucumbers and touch-me-nots. you can see how they get their name. Next, many trees and plants simply use the wind to disperse their seeds. Some of these plants have evolved to produce seeds that are so incredibly light that they can fly in the wind and land miles away from the parent plant. Many of the annoying weeds that keep popping up in your garden use this method, like the common dandelion, whose flying seed kind of looks like a Fortnite glider, and the Canadian thistle. Maple trees, on the other hand, don't necessarily have super lightweight seeds, but have evolved wing-like structures that look and act like helicopters when they fall off of the parent tree. These seeds don't fly as easily as a dandelion would, but can still travel great distances, especially if the wind is strong. Lastly, seeds can find their way into rivers, streams, and other bodies of water. Aquatic plants have evolved lighter, more buoyant seeds that can actually stay afloat or stick to the surface of the water for a while. Eventually, the seeds settle in the downstream soil right next to the river or the stream, which is usually why certain plants like willows or foxgloves are actually found near water. Water lilies produce fruits that stay afloat on top of the water for a while, but eventually fall beneath the surface to start a new plant. Coconut and palm trees can travel really long distances in ocean currents and reach new islands or even new continents. The plants that found their way into the basin used a bunch of these methods. Whether they were brought in from the birds, the wind, or by the water, they've successfully spread and established themselves as part of another ecosystem. These evolutionary adaptations help the plant survive, reproduce, and spread to new areas. And for me at least, it's always interesting to observe. Thanks so much for watching.
Well, we're coming up to 2 minutes left. I hope everything was straightforward. You need to be able to draw and label both the dicot and the monocot seeds. You need to know what each structure in the seed, the purpose of each structure, and you need to be able to identify the different types of plants. I will tell you once more. If you go to the week 1, there is a worksheet that you can use. Some people said they've done it already, so others can, those of you who haven't, can look at the worksheet and work through it. I think that I'd like to thank you for joining us, and please encourage your friends, even if they cannot make the actual meeting, to go to the site and look over the resources, etc.
Hello boys and girls, and today we'll be looking at parts of a plant. Are you ready? Let's go! Here is a plant. A plant has many parts. This is the leaf. The leaves use light from the sun to turn nutrients from the soil into food for the flower. This is the stem. The stem holds up the plant and carries food and water to the leaves. These are the roots. The roots hold the plant in the ground and pulls water and food from the soil. Some plants also have flowers. The flowers and its petals attract insects and birds. Flowers also make seeds. What's your favorite part of the plant? Is it the leaf? Maybe it's the stem. Is it the roots? Or is it that beautiful flower? How cool is that? Thank you so much for taking the journey with me. Have a beautiful day. This video was produced by Tremaine Ingram, Senior Assistant at Buttonwood Preschool.